Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. I'm Dr. Najam and I'll be presenting the first in a series of lectures on infection. And today the topic is microbiology of genitourinary tract. The objectives include barriers of genitourinary tract, colonization, and common uropathogens. So urinary tract is normally free of bacterial growth, but bacteria that ascend from rectal reservoir may cause UTIs. When bacterial virulence increases or host defense mechanisms decrease, bacterial inoculation, colonization, and infection of urinary tract occurs. Better understanding of pathogenesis of UTIs and role of host and bacterial factors has improved the ability to identify patients at risk and prevent or minimize sequelae. There are several modes of entry, and that include periurethral bacteria with a uropathogen from the gut ascending into the urinary tract. That causes most of the UTIs. There's colonization of urethra and migration to bladder. That causes invasion of bladder mediated by pili and adhesion factors. Ascent of bacteria from the bladder through ureter into the kidneys, and that causes most of the pyelonephritis. Short nature of female urethra plus proximity to vaginal vestibule and rectum predisposes women to more frequent UTIs. Other uncommon modes of entry include hematogenous spread, mostly seen in immunocompromised patients and neonates. And common pathogens implicated are Staph aureus, Candida species, and Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Lymphatogenous spread via rectal, colonic, and periuterine lymphatics has been postulated as a cause. However, that is not proven much. Direct extension of bacteria from adjacent organs to urinary tract, as occurs in intraperitoneal abscesses, vesico-intestinal or vesico-vaginal fistulas. Relapsing infections from inadequately treated foci in the prostate or kidney may seed other parts of urinary tract. So this is how the infection ascends up. Contamination of the periurethral area with a uropathogen from the gut, and that colonization of the urethra and migration up into the bladder. From then onward, the colonization invasion of bladder and mediated by pili and adhesions, inflammatory response in the bladder and fibrinogen accumulation in the catheter. Then there is neutrophil infiltration, bacterial multiplication, and immune system subversion, and that also involves biofilm formation, epithelial damage by bacterial toxins and proteases, and finally ascension up into the kidneys. A short clip that also shows how the bacteria ascend up into the urinary tract from the urethra up into the bladder, and then they invade the bladder mucosa in evading all the host defenses. So what are the host defenses? Host factors play an essential role in the pathogenesis of UTI. Unobstructed urinary flow with washout of ascending bacteria is essential in preventing UTIs. Characteristics of urine like osmolality, urea concentration, organic acid concentration, and pH inhibit bacterial growth and colonization. Factors in urine like TAM, horsefall, glycoprotein inhibit bacterial adherence. A study observed that severity of bacteriuria and degree of inflammation of the urinary tract were much greater in THG deficit mice, suggesting that THG helps eliminate bacterial infection from urinary tract and acts as a general host defense factor against UTI.
So, if we just stop for a little while, may I ask Dr. GM over there? I think this is something which is very important to understand, because if you are in in urology and you don't consider it as an important subject, then everything that you do in urology actually has got an implication and a reflection of something called infection. So for instance, if you have done a very marvelous job in reconstructive urology, but you are not considering the fact that your urinary diversion actually invites something called ascent of infection leading to, for instance, pyelonephritis. I'm talking about placing the ureters into ileal conduit or placing the ureters into intestinal pouches that you make bladder out of them. That has got a very devastating kind of effect on the overall outcome of the procedure that has been done. So the intention actually was correct if such a case was there. But if you don't consider something called ascent of infection, the biofilms and the factors like adhescence, then the whole subject, if it is just overlooked, it can have a very devastating effect on the whole thing. What do you think about it?
I definitely agree with this point. And whenever we do such like big procedures, we should consider each step according to these type of infections, and to prevent about these, we should consider all things.
And one thing more, that whenever we use intestine as a material for reconstruction, we must also consider that there is a kind of a symbiosis between the commensals and the host mechanism and the host say processes. So this symbiosis is, if that relationship is actually broken down, then you are causing pathogens to come over commensals. So this whole process has to be understood very minutely, very clearly by all of us. It doesn't mean that those who are not in the process of doing reconstructive surgery shouldn't consider it important, but this is an important factor in actually each and every aspect of urology. Right?
Exactly.
So urinary retention, stasis, or reflux of urine into the upper urinary tract promote bacterial growth and infection. Any anatomic or functional abnormality of the urinary tract that impedes urinary flow can increase the host susceptibility to UTI. These abnormalities include obstructive conditions at any level of urinary tract, neurological diseases affecting the function of the lower urinary tract, diabetes, and pregnancy. Presence of foreign bodies, example stones, catheters, stents, allows the bacteria to hide from these host defenses. Urinary epithelium not only provides a physical barrier to infections, but also has the capacity to recognize bacteria in order to activate innate host defenses. Neutrophils appear crucial in bacterial clearance from the kidneys, but their role in the bladder is less defined. Urothelial cells express toll-like receptors that, on engagement by specific bacterial components, leads to production of inflammatory mediators. Specific serum and urinary antibodies are produced by the kidneys that enhance bacterial opsonization and phagocytosis and inhibit bacterial adherence. Cytotoxic cells also express mannose receptors that act on type 1 pili on many strains of E. coli, which facilitate phagocytosis. Some species of E. coli have adapted to this host defense and shed this type 1 pili. These are some specific innate host defense that prevents, like in the urine, acidic nature of the urine is intolerable by most pathogens. High urine osmolality, urinary inhibitors of bacterial adherence, competitive inhibitors of attachment to urothelial cells, mechanical flushing of the urine flow. While as we see in the mucosal immunity, urothelial secretion of cytokines and chemokines Mucopolysaccharides lining increases difficulty of bacterial penetration, mucosal IgA, and in men, prostatic secretions contain bactericidal zinc and urethra. Studies demonstrate selectivity in bacterial adherence to cells of the urinary tract, and the degree of adherence correlates with colonization and infection. Women with recurrent UTIs have higher adherence of bacteria to their mucosal cells in vitro compared to women who never had an infection. This increased adherence may be due to having more binding sites for bacterial adhesins on their mucosal cells. Alternatively, these patients may not secrete soluble compounds like blood group antigens that compete for the same receptors that bind bacterial adhesins and inhibit bacterial adherence. Other important host factors include normal flora of the periurethra area, the prostate, and the presence of VUR. In females, normal vaginal and periurethral flora contain microorganisms like lactobacillus that help prevent uropathogenic colonization. Alterations in the periurethral environment, example changes in pH, estrogen levels, antibiotic use can damage periurethral flora, allowing uropathogens to colonize and infect urinary tract. As told before, in men, prostatic fluid contains zinc, which has the potent antimicrobial activity. In children, the presence of VUR does not increase their susceptibility to UTI, but does allow bacteria to be inoculated into the upper tract and infection to progress and lead to possible renal scarring. Host factors in the elderly. Aging is associated with increased susceptibility to UTI in part because of increased incidence of obstructive uropathy in men and alteration in vaginal and periurethral flora from menopause in women. Other causes include soiling of the perineum from fecal incontinence, neuromuscular diseases, increased instrumentation, and bladder catheterization. So we discussed the host factors, now the bacterial pathogenic factors that are implicated in the UTIs. Not all bacteria can adhere to and infect the urinary tract. Of the many strains of E. coli, O, K, and H serogroups are uropathogenic, and they have increased adherence properties to uroepithelial cells, resistance to bactericidal activity of human serum, production of hemolysin, and increased expression of K capsular antigen. The ability of E. coli to adhere to the epithelial cell is mediated by ligands located on tips of bacterial fimbriae or pili. The ligands bind to glycolipids or glycoprotein receptors on the surface membrane of uroepithelial cells. The pili are classified by their ability to cause hemagglutination and type of sugar that can block this process.
One more thing that one has to understand is all the biological systems, they go in parallel and they all evolve. For instance, the evolutionary process in bacterial world and in the viral world and in us as humans, it's going on. It's never stopped somewhere in time. So by that what I mean is, for instance, if we do something to kill a bacteria, for instance, E. coli, what the E. coli will do, it will not just surrender itself. It will actually change the strain, maybe change the bacterial fimbriae, maybe the adhesins will actually be gone. So there are many things that the bacteria can also do in order to survive. So every biological unit has got the ability to survive. And this is the kind of potential that we all have to consider. So it's better to understand the whole process rather than prescribing, for instance, one class of drugs and then after some time another class of drugs called bactericidal drugs. But these drugs, they will give you a very short-term benefit. After some time, the strains will be actually resistant to those kind of drugs, whatever those kind of drugs will be. So either you have to change the drugs too often, or you have to think a lot. Think why you want to kill a bacteria. Is it something to just, if there is a presence of bacteria, you want a sterile world? You can't have a sterile world. It is something which is impossible. So taking some possibility out of impossibility is the job of all of us, since we are in the process of healthcare givers. So healthcare giving. So we have to consider when is the point that we want to prescribe something called antibiotic. So maybe there are other processes which are actually physiological rather than pathological that we can consider. So the whole process of living with infection has to be reconsidered and rethinked, rather than going on to kill something which we actually don't see with our own eyes. We all presume that this is something which is happening because of the presence of E. coli. Now, E. coli is a normal sort of a flora in the gut. But when it comes into the urinary system, it becomes a pathogen. So one time, at one place, it is something which is helpful. It is something which is commensal. At the other point, within the same body, it becomes a pathogen. So we have to think a lot in order to devise a strategy of living with all these biological structures.
This is an electron micrograph picture of E. coli with Fimbriae and pili. So P. pili, which can agglutinate human blood, bind to glycolipid lipid receptors on uroepithelial cells, erythrocytes, and renal tubular cells. Whereas type 1 pili, which can agglutinate guinea pig blood, bind to monocyte residues on the uroepithelial cells. P. pili are observed in around 90% of E. coli strains causing pyelonephritis, but less than 20% of the strains causing lower UTIs. In contrast, type 1 pili have bacteria adhere to bladder mucosa. Most UPEC or uropathogenic E. coli have both types of pili. Once attachment to the uroepithelial cells occurs, other bacterial pathogenic factors become important. Most UPEC strains produce hemolysin, which initiates tissue invasion and makes iron available for the infecting pathogen. The presence of K antigen on the invading bacteria protects them from phagocytosis by neutrophils. These factors allow the infecting pathogens to escape the various host defenses. It has been observed that many bacteria, such as E. coli, can invade in the host cells, acting as opportunistic intercellular pathogens. Cytotoxic necrotizing factor AFA/DR adhesions and type 1 pili have shown to promote invasion into the host cells. Binding of FIMH adhesion at the distal tip of type 1 pili to the host membrane leads to the recruitment of the focal adhesion kinase, phosphoinositide 3 kinases, alpha-actinin, and vinculin, which results in localized acting rearrangements and engulfment of the bound bacterium by zipping of the membrane around the bacteria. So this picture shows the same aspect as I told before. This is the type 1 pili that is usually seen to infect in the bladder mucosal cells. It binds to the receptor uroplakin and then causes engulfment into the cell. And the cascade involved then causes the acting rearrangements and engulfment, and then further proliferation and dispersion of the bacteria. And if we see in case of the kidney cells, the P. pili are involved in more than 90% of the cases of pyelonephritis. So they bind to the receptors and cause infection in the kidneys. The intracellular bacterium mature into biofilms, creating pod-like structures on the uroepithelial surface. The pods contain bacteria encased in a polysaccharide-rich matrix, surrounding by a protective shell of uroplakin. The ability of the uropathogenic bacteria to transiently invade, survive, and multiply within the host cells and to create biofilms on genitourinary tract tissue, they provide a mechanism for the persistence and recurrence of UTIs. This again shows the invasion and proliferation of the bacteria and then further dispersion of the bacteria. So the causative pathogens that are involved in the UTIs, most UTIs are caused by a single bacterial species. At least 80% of the uncomplicated cystitis and pyelonephritis in premenopausal women are due to E. coli, with most of the uropathogenic strains belonging to the O serogroups. Other less common uropathogens include Staphylococcus saprophyticus, Klebsiella, Proteus, Enterobacter species, and Enterococci. In hospital-acquired UTIs, a wider variety of causative organisms is found, including Pseudomonas and Staphylococcus species. UTIs caused by Staph aureus often result from hematogenous dissemination. Group B beta hemolytic streptococci can cause UTIs in pregnant women. Staphylococcus saprophyticus, once often regarded as urinary contaminants, can cause uncomplicated UTIs in young women. In children, the causative bacterial spectrum is slightly different, but there is still a predominance of E. coli among inpatient and outpatient populations. Enterobacter, Enterococcus, and Klebsiella species make up the remainder of the common culprits of pediatric UTIs. Anaerobic bacteria, Lactobacilli, Corynebacteria, Streptococci, and Staphylococcus epidermidis are found in normal periurethral flora, and they normally do not cause UTIs in healthy individuals and are considered common urinary contaminants. If you talk about urethritis, urethritis can be a result of sexually transmitted diseases, and there are two broad classes: are gonococcal urethritis caused by Neisseria gonorrhoeae, and non-gonococcal urethritis caused by all the other organisms, including chlamydia. If you talk about gonococcal urethritis, then Neisseria gonorrhoeae is the main culprit. Is a gram-negative diplococcus, second most common bacterial cause of STDs in the US. Causes urethritis, epididymitis, proctitis, and prostatitis in men. In women, it causes PID, tubal scarring, infertility, ectopic pregnancy, and chronic pelvic pain, and can increase the risk of contracting and transmitting HIV. If you talk about the non-gonococcal urethritis, chlamydia trachomatis accounts for 15 to 40% of cases of non-gonococcal urethritis. Other less common causes include Mycoplasma genitalium, Trichomonas vaginalis, adenoviruses, and herpes simplex virus type 1.
So, Najam, what do you think urethritis, gonococcal or non-gonococcal? Is it something which is very common, or it is something which becomes rarer and rarer since we don't see these cases too often? So what is your gut feeling? Is it there somewhere hidden in the community, or is it something which is like another evolutionary process in where we don't see these kind of things now?
So I believe it is present, but usually like in females, they may complain of irritation of lower urinary tract and dysuria and that sort of thing. So we're usually focusing on the other aspects of maybe there might be other spectrobacteria involved, rather than looking into this sexually transmitted aspect.
Right. So GM, what do you think? Is it something which is underreported, underrepresented, or we don't want to see, so we don't want to have these kind of patients?
No, sir. I think it's definitely underreported into the tertiary care hospital setups because of filling up same people usually don't present at the higher volume centers, and they avoid to come forward for these type of infections. Although gonococcal infections are mostly reported into the tertiary care hospitals because of abrupt onset of symptoms, but chlamydial infections usually are underreported into tertiary care hospitals and usually being treated at the local GPs, and they usually present at the tertiary care hospitals once they have caused much more complications like multiple strictures or meatal stenosis or like that, or in females. Usually they present when patient have developed infertility or subfertility, and the reason behind this is they usually occur after physical relations and shameful feeling of the patients and lack of awareness.
Right.
I should
So
not
if I may ask the same question over here to my friends, what do you think? Is it something which is common? Is it something which is underreported, or is it something which has gone out of the world, at least in our city, Karachi, where we practice? क्या कहते हैं आप लोग? क्या ख्याल है आपका? बोलिए.
Exist तो करते हैं cases. It's not basically it is underreported. People usually hide these complaints. Again, we do see cases in our OPD, maybe in 2 or 3 cases in our stone OPD. So cases to exist कर रहे हैं.
Because you see, if you are not trained in picking up a case of, for instance, gonorrhea or, for instance, syphilis, how come you treat such a patient? If somebody comes to you with say, a knee pain and a runny nose and urethritis, so this is a strange kind of combination of symptoms. How come you know that this is something which is related to gonorrhea or maybe syphilis or maybe neurosyphilis? Because if the eye involvement is there, ophthalmic involvement, there is a thing called neurosyphilis going on to have ophthalmitis and one eye is gone. From the history, just 100 years back, this was so common that if a doctor doesn't recognize syphilis, he or she is not a doctor. And if a person in Europe, just 150 years back, doesn't have syphilis or any kind of these diseases, he is not considered to be a fashionable person. Casanova. So this is a kind of history that we have to take along with this. Because if we don't consider this part of history as part of understanding the whole process of urology and treating patients and going to the patients and taking out the disease out of them and treating, we'll be missing a lot. Because these things, they do exist. They exist in communities which are like migrant communities. For instance, in the city of Karachi, it will be existing more as compared to a city called Hyderabad, maybe, because the migrant population is more here as compared to Hyderabad or maybe Sakkar or anywhere else in Pakistan. The same goes with big cities like New York. In the Middle East, for instance, because the migrant population is there in the Middle East, they come there for labor work. So you see, the doctor sometimes has to go out of the clinic towards the community to see where the disease is, because this disease will not be actually clustered or compact within the same community. It will go out of the community and it will become a very disastrous sort of a thing. So coming back to the same problem, if we don't have that kind of thinking process, we will not be able to judge whether the person has got urethritis because of gonococcal infection or non-gonococcal infection. We will always skip this chapter because we don't see the cases normally, and because if we see a case, we always put these cases into some kind of a wastebasket, prescribe any antibiotic and just do away with the case because we don't want to see these cases. So we have to train ourselves. We have to train ourselves in accepting the fact that these cases do exist. यहाँ से जो है ना बात स्टार्ट होगी. आपने अगर पहले से सोच लिया कि केस एग्जिस्ट ही नहीं करता तो फिर आप अपने आप को ट्रेन ही नहीं करेंगे. The same happens with, for instance, tuberculosis. Very few people in Europe and in America, they know how to deal with tuberculosis because this wasn't the fact for the past 50 years in their continent. But you can very easily pick those cases here in our region, in Southeast Asia or South Asia. So this is the kind of training that we all should have, and the thinking we all should have.
Agreed, sir.
Right.
Talk about chlamydia. It's the most common bacterial sexually transmitted disease in the US. Prevalence is highest in persons 25 years or older. Other sequelae in men include epididymitis and Richter syndrome. Untreated chlamydial infection in men can result in transmission to female partners. Ascending infection in females can result in scarring of fallopian tubes, pelvic inflammatory disease, risk of ectopic pregnancy, pelvic pain, and infertility.
Just one more riddle. Noman, do you know what Richter syndrome is? Because you have read this syndrome in the 4th year in Robbins Pathology and in the final year in Bailey and Love.
Sir, as far as I remember, there is some joint pain arthritis in it for.
जो थोड़ी देर पहले मैंने कहा था ये वही है, ठीक है. So if you know this cardiac combination, then you will be able to pick those cases. Otherwise not. They are there. They are present right around us.
Trichomonas vaginalis is a flagellated parasite that exclusively infects urinary tract. Is a common vaginal pathogen but can cause urethritis in men. Prevalence ranges from 3% to 17%. Lastly, if we talk about tuberculosis, Mycobacterium tuberculosis and other non-tuberculous mycobacteria may be found when cultures for AFB are requested. They do not grow under routine aerobic conditions and may be found during evaluation for sterile pyuria. The mere presence of mycobacteria may not indicate tissue invasion. Therefore, factors such as symptoms, endoscopic or radiologic evidence of infection, abnormal urine sediment, absence of other organisms, and presence of granulomas should be considered before therapy is instituted.
Right. So this is a subject which is something to have more in-depth analysis and rethink and revisiting. So it needs a lot. But one thing is for sure, whenever we practice in an area, in a city, or in a country, every geographical area is a unique area. And every community in which we are, there is no excuse. You have to understand the community and the community practices. Gone are the days when the doctor sits and asks the patient to come in to him if there is any problem. Now the doctor has to go out, and this is a kind of community service and the community practice that has to be there. And this is something which is needed if we want to address this subject of urinary tract infection. Otherwise, urinary tract infections will lead to a lot of devastating effects, and there are reports and something in the literature coming up. There's urinary tract infection leads to something called cancer of the bladder. So we are actually moving towards some sort of a unifying theory behind everything. So the unifying theory behind everything, which is known as theory for everything, is actually starting from inflammation, whether it's a bacterially induced or started infection or virally induced infection, leading to something devastating as cancer or oncology. So we have got a very, say, a pinpoint or converging theory for everything. But provided we do understand all the initial steps and the basic steps of science behind it. So your comment from Sakhar, Dr. GM.
Yes, sir. Basically, we encounter infections because of lack of awareness, and we we are unable to control these infections because of this lack of awareness. We do not properly treat infections, or we don't know when to treat the infection, and when there is infection and when there is simply a colonization, and that produces more problematic situation when these bacteria develop resistance against many of the drugs and resistance against our host defense mechanisms. We are unable because of lack of awareness that how to control or how to prevent these infections. As we all say that prevention is better than cure, and we ourselves provide a ground for these bacteria or these viruses or these organisms to come and infect humans only because of lack of awareness, lack of knowledge against these bacteria. And this is why they supervene over human host defense mechanisms. This is the point where we have to work out and let ourselves and others to know how to prevent these infections, to prevent more devastating future which can come across with us. This is my point.
Right, and we are a big stakeholder in the whole process of drug resistance. If we don't use something injudiciously, if we overprescribe these antibiotics, we will surely have resistant strains. So whatever we see around us, resistant strains, it's all because of the fact that we have done something wrong somewhere in the past as a community of doctors. So it's a very big responsibility on us. Since we are in the midst of a lot of pandemics, we are in the midst of a pandemic, and there are many pandemics that are actually looming around. One of the most important pandemic is the resistant infection, urinary tract infection, which is actually resistant to all the ciprofloxacin and all these floxacins, right? So if we don't have a drug for urinary tract infection, for the treatment of urinary tract infection, where should we go then? That's a big question, because the spectrum is becoming narrower and narrower, and we have got few options left to us now. And this is all because of us. We have done it. We have done this mess for us and for the patients all over the world. Sir, your comments.
Thank you very much. I think you must have discussed all the things, but I want to say a few words about these STIs and UTI. In our setup, I think we see 1 or 2 cases of gonococcal urethritis in OPD, at least because people call me, so I have an opportunity to see 1 or 2 cases in each OPD with the gonococcal urethritis. And but we don't see syphilis as a presenting disease. And gonococcal urethritis is one of the cause of stricture urethra. So in those patients, they call bulbar urethral stricture. So I think if there is an idiopathic bulbar urethral stricture, we must look for gonococcus in these patients. And other thing is that the non-gonococcal urethritis are missed because we don't have any special cultures for culturing these organisms. So, but we don't have these cultures here until unless we ask the microbiologist to look for these fastidious this. So the non-gonococcal urethritis is I think largely missed and maybe diagnosed empirically. They treated empirically. But in female patients, if there is if UTI is not settling, then I think high vaginal swab in the females is also an important investigation to diagnose these STIs. And urethra swab should be taken by the doctor who sees the pus at the urethra in these patients with history of contact. And I think if you must have discussed this, if one STI is there, then can be possibility of other things like viral disease. So viral markers like HIV is also important to investigation in these patients. So And we must teach our patients for the prevention.
Yes, sir.
If we find out any case, like use of safe practice of sex and condoms, and for UTI, for example, they should increase their fluid intake and frequent voiding before coitus and after coitus is also one of the preventing measures. And the tracing of contacts is also an important aspect for prevention.
Yes, sir. And sir, once I asked this question to one of my colleagues in Army, and they say that this is so common that all those who are on the front lines, almost 90% of the soldiers, foot soldiers, they have got this problem.
Sure, I'm sure.
Yes, sir. So this is the most devastating and the most common thing that they have on the front line, and because of that, they were just called back and then treated in the hospital. So this is the kind of a news that we don't normally just read in the newspaper or have these communications, but they do exist.
अच्छा दूसरी चीज जो ना जेनेटल माइक्रोबियोम जो है
जी.
is one of the causes of I think overactive bladder in females.
Yes.
And we know what's the overactive bladder. It's a symptom complex which includes the urgency and usually associated with frequency, nocturia, and may be associated with incontinence. So if there is no apparent cause for overactive bladder, then the genital microbes or the high vaginal swab is one of the investigation.
Yes.
Which should be done in overactive bladder symptom patient, because this is one of the potential cause of overactive bladder symptoms in females.
And this microbiome is also a very interesting kind of subject, because once Dr. Philip Rensley earlier, 10, 20 years back, he said that all those children who have got UTI, if they have yogurt in their diet, and that yogurt should be not commercially made, but they were made in the houses, homes, that's enough for the UTI to just be treated, or cranberry juice and things like that. So he was actually in favor of the microbiome to be cultured within the same body in which the infection is happening. So this is a very, very different kind of a subject and a very important subject.
But I think we should try to make a diagnosis with these symptoms. And once we make the diagnosis, then we must treat according to the guidelines,
Yes.
not empirically, because empirically can lead to chronic disease. Like if you treat gonococcus partially, then it can lead to stricture formation, for example, after 10 years.
Right.
It takes much time, but can lead to other complications. So one should try its utmost to diagnose what is the actually case with the urethral swab or high vaginal swab or other like PCR testing, which is available here, and then treat it according to the guidelines in the book.
So for all of us, if you are interested in the subject of microbiome, please read and Google a topic called fecal transplantation. You will have a lot of surprises to understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.